Anjali Sharma was a young bride, full of dreams for a happy future. Rohit Mehra, her new husband, was admired in the community for his charm and success, and Neha, Anjali's younger sister, was the person she trusted most in the world. But within weeks of the wedding, this bond of love and trust turned into a triangle of betrayal, rage, and tragedy. What began as a joyous union ended in brutal violence when Anjali discovered the darkest secret of all her husband's secret affair with her own sister. The wedding of Anjali Sharma and Rohit Mehra was the kind of event that everyone in their small town remembered for months afterward. The Sharma family had spared no expense in arranging the celebrations, determined to give their beloved daughter the grand beginning she deserved. Anjali was just 23, a bright young woman who had recently completed her postgraduate studies. She was admired by her teachers for her intelligence and respected by her peers for her kindness. Her parents saw her as the pride of their home, the one who would bring honor to their family name through both her character and her achievements. When the proposal from the Mehra family came, it felt like fate had answered their prayers. Rohit came from a well-off household, a family known for their successful business and social reputation. He was handsome, confident, and carried himself with the kind of ease that made him seem dependable. The wedding rituals began days before the actual ceremony. Neighbors and relatives filled the Sharma home with songs and laughter, as colorful decorations were hung from every wall. Anjali looked radiant, her face glowing under the soft lights of the Mehndi ceremony, where intricate patterns of henna covered her hands. Everyone praised her beauty and good fortune, and she smiled shyly, though inside she was nervous. She had only met Rohit a handful of times before the engagement, but like many arranged marriages, her trust rested on the assurances of her parents. They had told her that Rohit was the perfect match, a man who would keep her safe and happy. With her heart full of hope, she tried to believe it. On the day of the wedding, the streets outside the venue were filled with people watching Rohit's grand procession. The groom arrived on a decorated horse, accompanied by music, laughter, and the flashing lights of cameras capturing every moment. Anjali, dressed in a deep red bridal lehenga embroidered with gold, looked like she had stepped out of a dream. Her friends whispered that she was the most beautiful bride they had ever seen. The rituals were performed one after another, the sacred fire burning brightly as they circled it together, tying their lives into a bond that was supposed to last forever. Their families watched with pride, convinced they had done everything right in bringing these two together. After the ceremony, the couple was showered with blessings. Guests left with full hearts, telling each other how fortunate Anjali was to have married into such a respectable family. To everyone, it appeared to be the perfect union, two families joined by tradition, wealth, and hope for a prosperous future. Anjali's parents cried as they bid her farewell, sending her off to her new life with Rohit. She sat quietly in the car, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her wedding bangles. Her heart raced with both excitement and fear, a mix of emotions every new bride feels when stepping into the unknown. She promised herself she would adjust, she would learn to love, and she would make her new family proud. No one at that moment could have imagined the storm that was silently waiting. Behind the sparkle of jewelry and the sound of celebration, there were shadows hidden from sight. What looked like the start of a fairy tale would soon turn into one of the darkest tragedies the town had ever known. When Anjali first moved into the Mehra household, she was relieved by the warmth she received. Rohit's parents welcomed her with kindness, and the extended family seemed eager to accept her as one of their own. For the first few weeks, everything appeared normal. She busied herself with settling into her new role as a wife and daughter-in-law, learning the rhythms of the household and adjusting to her husband's lifestyle. Rohit treated her politely, though she noticed he was often distracted. He spent long hours away from home, and when he returned his conversations were brief, his phone constantly in his hand. Anjali told herself it was the stress of business and tried not to dwell on it. Things began to feel strange when her younger sister Neha started visiting frequently. Neha, only 21, had been close to Anjali since childhood. The two shared everything growing up, and Anjali was happy to see her sister often, believing it would ease her transition into married life. At first, she was glad Neha came by, bringing laughter and familiarity into the new household. But as days passed, Anjali began to sense a shift. It seemed unusually attentive whenever Neha was around. His eyes lingered on her longer than was appropriate, and he laughed a little too easily at her jokes. It unsettled Anjali, though she brushed it aside as her imagination. The unease grew when she noticed late-night phone calls. It would step out of their room to take them, lowering his voice so she could not hear. Sometimes she woke up in the middle of the night to find him still typing on his phone, screen light flashing across his face. If she asked, he dismissed it as work or messages from friends. Anjali wanted to trust him, but the hollow feeling in her chest deepened each time he avoided her gaze. She began to watch him more closely, quietly observing patterns that didn't make sense. One evening, while helping Neha with tea in the kitchen, Anjali noticed her sister's phone buzzing with a message. For a split second, she caught a glimpse of its name on the screen before Neha quickly tucked the phone away. Anjali froze, her mind racing, but she forced a smile, saying nothing. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was overthinking everything. Yet deep down, something inside her whispered that she was standing on the edge of a dangerous truth. As weeks went by, the bond between Rohit and Neha seemed to grow bolder, though never openly acknowledged. Shared glances across the room, whispered conversations when they thought no one was watching, and sudden silences when Anjali entered. They were small details, but they formed a pattern impossible to ignore. Anjali's world, once filled with the excitement of new beginnings, started to feel suffocating. The happiness she had hoped for seemed to be slipping away, replaced with suspicion and dread. She wanted to confront them, yet fear of tearing apart her family kept her silent. What Anjali didn't know was that the affair between Rohit and Neha had begun long before the marriage. Her wedding had been nothing more than a mask, a convenient arrangement that suited the families while hiding the forbidden relationship in the shadows. The love she thought she had found was never hers. It belonged to someone else, someone far too close to her. The day Anjali discovered the truth began like any other. She woke early, performed her household duties, and prepared breakfast for Rohit before he left for work. But something about his behavior struck her that morning. He seemed restless, pacing around the room while switching between his two phones. One of them, a sleek black device she had rarely seen him use, never left his side. Later that day, while tidying up the bedroom, she noticed he had carelessly left that very phone inside the drawer of his bedside table. At first, she hesitated. She had never been the type to invade someone's privacy. Yet the unease that had been gnawing at her for weeks grew too heavy to ignore. With trembling hands, she opened the phone. What she saw confirmed her deepest fears. The device was filled with messages, and almost all of them were from her sister Neha. The texts carried a tone far beyond casual conversation. They were filled with declarations of love, secret plans, and intimate details that no sister should ever read. Photos of the two together appeared in the gallery, pictures taken when she wasn't around. Her breath caught in her throat as the world around her seemed to collapse. Every suspicion, every uneasy moment came rushing back to her in that instant. Her husband, the man she had trusted with her life, was in love with her own sister. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the evidence, her mind racing with confusion and betrayal. The ground beneath her felt as though it had disappeared, leaving her to fall endlessly. Memories of her wedding came flooding back. How proud her parents had been, how joyful the guests were, how she herself had clung to hope for a happy marriage. All of it now felt like a cruel performance, staged while her husband's heart belonged elsewhere. The pain of discovering Rohit's deceit was unbearable, but knowing her sister had been complicit cut even deeper. That evening when Rohit returned home, Anjali could no longer hold back. Her voice trembled as she confronted him, demanding answers, showing him the phone she had found. For a moment his face changed, first shock, then fear, but almost instantly fear turned into fury. Rather than admitting the truth, Rohit lashed out in anger, accusing her of invading his privacy and threatening to ruin his reputation. His words were harsh, his tone dangerous. The mask of charm and politeness he wore in front of others slipped away, revealing the cruelty underneath. The argument escalated quickly. Anjali, wounded by betrayal, stood her ground, insisting that their marriage was a lie. She threatened to tell her family, to expose the affair that had been hidden for so long. This was the moment Roe had dreaded the most, the possibility of shame, dishonor, and the collapse of everything he had carefully concealed. Panic and rage boiled inside him, clouding all reason. Anjali's determination to seek justice only fueled his anger further, pushing him to a breaking point. That night marked the shift from suspicion to undeniable danger. What began as a confrontation between a wife and husband had turned into a violent storm of emotions. The walls of the Mehra household, which once echoed with laughter during the wedding celebrations, now shook with shouts and crashing sounds. For Anjali, there was no way back to innocence. She had uncovered the truth, and in doing so had unknowingly stepped into the path of her own destruction. The night of Anjali's death was one that would haunt everyone who later heard the story. Tension had been growing in the Mehra household ever since she confronted Rohit about his affair with Neha. Days passed with arguments that never reached resolution. Rohit's temper grew shorter, his tone sharper, while Anjali remained firm in her decision to expose the truth. She no longer feared his anger. What hurt her more was the betrayal itself. But her courage, instead of earning her justice, sealed her fate. On that fatal night, the house was quiet. Rohit had returned home later than usual, his face stern and unreadable. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Anjali, weary from days of conflict, finally told him that she could no longer live in a marriage built on lies. She would tell her parents everything, and she would not allow herself to be silenced any longer. Those words struck Rohit, hit like a blade. His mind spun with the image of public shame, of his family's honor in ruins, of whispers spreading through the community about his relationship with his wife's sister. To him, the thought of being exposed was worse than anything. The argument escalated quickly, echoing through the walls of the home. Neighbors later recalled hearing raised voices, though none could have imagined the brutality unfolding inside. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Rohit struck Anjali. What began as a single slap spiraled into relentless violence. His anger, fueled by fear of exposure, knew no bounds. He pushed her, hit her, and dragged her across the room as she screamed for him to stop. The sound of breaking objects filled the house, furniture knocked over in the chaos. Anjali's cries grew weaker as the blows rained down. She tried to shield herself, but Rohit's strength and fury overpowered her. In those moments, Rohit seemed less like a husband and more like a man possessed. His hands, once symbols of protection during the rituals of marriage, became instruments of destruction. He struck again and again until the fight left her body. By the time silence returned to the room, Anjali lay lifeless, her face bruised, her body broken. The transformation from argument to tragedy had been terrifyingly swift. Rohit stood over her, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his face, as the horrifying reality of what he had done began to sink in. Panic set in almost immediately. He knew the truth could never come out, not the affair, not the beating, not the murder. He called Neha, desperate and trembling, confessing what had just happened. She rushed to the house, her face pale with shock, but instead of grief for her sister, she focused on protecting Rohit and herself. Together, they hatched a plan. They staged the scene to look like an accident. They carried Anjali's body toward the staircase and placed it in a way that suggested she had slipped and fallen. They wiped what traces they could, rearranged the setting, and prayed it would convince others. But blood leaves traces that cannot be erased, and bruises tell stories that lies cannot cover. As dawn broke and family members discovered the tragedy, Rohit and Neha clung to their rehearsed explanation. Yet behind their words was the lingering shadow of guilt, and behind their eyes the fear that the truth was too heavy to remain hidden. The night that began with raised voices had ended with a young woman's life brutally cut short, her dreams extinguished by the very people she trusted most. The morning after Anjali's death, the Mehra household was in chaos. Family members rushed into the hallway where a body lay at the foot of the stairs. Rohit, his face pale and voice trembling, claimed she had slipped during the night. Neha stood nearby, her expression carefully composed, repeating his version of events whenever anyone asked. At first, the story sounded tragic but believable. Accidents in homes were not uncommon, and the sight of a young bride dead within weeks of her marriage sent shockwaves through the community. Relatives wept, neighbors gathered outside the house, and whispers of misfortune spread like wildfire. But beneath the grief, something felt wrong. The bruises on Anjali's arms, the swelling on her face, and the blood patterns around the body did not align with a simple fall. When the police arrived, they listened to Rohit's account, but grew suspicious almost immediately. The inconsistencies in his statement were too glaring to ignore. Officers noticed the overturned furniture in the bedroom upstairs, the broken glass near the bed, and the bloodstains that trailed unevenly toward the staircase. A fall could not have caused the injuries documented by the forensic team. It was clear there had been a struggle. Within hours, investigators widened their search, seizing both of Rohit's phones. What they discovered unraveled the carefully constructed lie. Hundreds of messages between him and Neha revealed the truth of their relationship. Plans, secret meetings, and words of intimacy painted a clear picture. The marriage had been a facade, and Anjali's presence in their lives had become an obstacle. The revelation sent shockwaves through both families. The Sharmas, who had proudly married their daughter into what they believed was a respectable household, were crushed with grief and rage. The betrayal cut deeper when they realized Neha, their younger daughter, had been part of the deception. Parents who once celebrated their daughter's closeness now saw the bond twisted into something destructive. The community, too, recoiled at the scandal. People who had danced and sung at the wedding now whispered about greed, betrayal, and lust. The same marriage that had been praised as a perfect union became a symbol of treachery and tragedy. As the investigation progressed, Rohit was charged with murder, while Neha faced charges for abetment and conspiracy. During questioning, their carefully rehearsed defenses fell apart under the weight of evidence. Witnesses spoke of the late-night arguments. Neighbors confirmed hearing violent noises the night of Anjali's death, and forensic experts dismantled the claim of an accidental fall. The case quickly became a headline in local news, igniting debates about family honor, blind trust, and the hidden dangers behind seemingly perfect marriages. For Anjali's parents, justice felt like a small consolation in the face of their devastating loss. They had lost one daughter to murder and the other to disgrace. The image of Anjali in her wedding attire, smiling shyly as she left their home, would forever clash with the memory of her broken body being returned to them far too soon. What should have been a life of companionship and love had instead turned into a cautionary tale of betrayal and rage. The court eventually delivered its verdict. Rohit received a life sentence for the murder of his wife, while Neha was found guilty of aiding and concealing the crime. Yet even as justice was served, the scars remained. Anjali's story became a chilling reminder that beneath the glitter of celebrations and the promises of marriage, darkness can sometimes hide, waiting for the moment to destroy everything. Her death was not just the end of a life, but the unraveling of an entire family, proving that secrets built on betrayal can only end in tragedy.